So getting back to how you practice throughout the day when you're so busy, how do you like to structure your practice day? Because you mentioned you like to wake up and warm up right before rehearsal, but then you have rehearsal, which is 4 hours?
Our rehearsals change all the time. They're a minimum of 2.5 hours, but sometimes they can be 3.5, or 4. It just depends on the repertoire.
Okay, so you wake up, you have an hour of practice, and then like a half hour to get to work, and then you do the 2.5 to 4 hour rehearsal. But then how do you structure your practice the rest of the day, even when you have an opera that night?
To be quite honest with you, if on days when I have a double, I'm rarely doing much practice in between. If I get up in the morning and I practice an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then I go to a 3-hour rehearsal, and then I come back and play a show that's also another, on average, 3.5 hours. That's probably the average length of a night at the opera. Put that together, 3.5 and 3 is 6.5, 7.5. That's 7.5 hours of having the trombone in your hand. It's not necessarily always on your face. That's a lot of time with the instrument in your hand.
Especially mentally.
Yeah, exactly. So on days like that, which happen with some regularity, I'm not going to practice a ton, just to be honest. I mean, that may sound a little strange to some students who are in school and are kind of in the groove of putting in 3 to 4 hours a day, but I find that I really don't need that. Hopefully there are a few nights a week or a few mornings a week where I don't have both a rehearsal and a show that evening, and then I'll find a couple of hours here or there to do some practice. And what's more important to me is not so much that I get in all of my practice every single day. What matters to me is that more so is that over the course of a week, I accomplish the work that I need to accomplish. That might mean that I warm up for an hour and today I actually get an hour and a half or 2 of practice. Tomorrow I might just get that 1 hour warm-up time, and the next day I get 2 hours, and the next day I get none. But over the course of the week, I've consumed the material that I need to consume, and I've done the exercises that I need to do to stay in shape for the things that I need to do for my job.
Now, I think when we spoke in the past, you plan out everything you do like the weekend before, and you plan out your week where all you're going to practice and everything. Do you still do that?
I do that when I'm the best version of myself. So I mean, I wish I could just say, yes, every Sunday evening at 7:30, I sit down and I make the most organized plan, and I know that I'm going to play 4 lip slurs at this time and 2 scales and whatever. And there have definitely been times in my life when I've done that. I think now it just comes a little bit more organically. I almost have a feel for it, so I don't have to write it down every single time. I can look at my schedule and be like, this is where that's going to fit, that's where this is going to fit. And if I have a significant project coming up, then that's usually the time when I will force myself to get more and more regimented. For example, right now, my job is mostly, or when I say right now, I mean over the coming weeks, I don't have any solo recitals immediately coming up. So I can allow myself to be a little bit more lax and just think, I need to warm up and practice and do different fundamental cleaning things that I want to do, maintenance stuff that I've been wanting to organize and think about a little bit more, so I'm not getting up on Sunday and planning every minute of my practice. When next semester comes around, I think I have a couple of recitals that I'm planning on doing. I'll probably tighten up the ship a little bit because there's deadlines you got to meet and you have to be on point. It's a little bit different. So it's flexible.
So you mentioned earlier, just a second ago, that sometimes you get a little lax when you don't have so much stuff going on, but how do you stay inspired to really go after more and more stuff when you don't have a lot going on, to make sure oh, we don't have many operas this week, I can just practice a little less to spend time with other things. But how do you stay inspired to go back to the woodshed day in and day out?
For one thing, I'm now, I think as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm inspired by a lot of things that aren't just music. To answer the question from a musical perspective, when I do that huge scheduling bit that I was telling you about earlier, part of that scheduling is also me looking at the calendar for Carnegie Hall, for Jazz at Lincoln Center, and for the New York Philharmonic, and maybe even a handful of other things that are happening in the city. And I will usually look through all the different pamphlets and see, these are the concerts that I find to be really interesting that I would love to go to. Like Wynton Marsalis and Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra are doing this piece called Spaces next week. I really want to see that, so we'll probably go to that. Friend David Cooper is playing with the New York Philharmonic in a couple of weeks whenever they're doing, I think it might be Bruckner 7 or something like that. So we're going to go to that. But at any rate, I will mark down all those different evenings. I'll put those against my calendar that I've already created, and say, oh, the Philharmonic is doing Bruckner 7 on this night, and they're doing Scheherazade on that night, and Berlin is playing at Carnegie, and Christian McBride is playing at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and I'll look at all these things and find the nights that I have free, and I buy tickets for all of them. We'll probably see anywhere between 20 and 25 shows a year. So we're always out seeing things because I still have that student-like enthusiasm. I'm a total music geek. You know, we've seen the Mariinsky Orchestra play probably every year for the last 7 or 8 years. We find a way to go. They're usually there for 4 nights in a row or something like that. One of those works out with my schedule. We go, we love to hear them. That keeps me musically inspired. I have a lot of great musical friends, you know, who are always in town. Mike Dees is one of my good friends. Elliot Mason is one of my good friends. If you don't have time to go to a concert, sometimes just come home after work and I watch YouTube videos of great players and just in awe of the great things that people are capable of doing on all these instruments now. And it makes you think, wow, when I get up tomorrow, I need to work a little bit more, or I should try to practice that technique, or I can't believe that guy can do this thing, or that vibrato was really interesting. I've got to figure out how to make this work, or this concept that this person was talking about seems really unique. Let me do some work on that.
You mentioned non-musical things that you do to get inspired. What do you do for that kind of inspiration?
I love sports. I watch a ton of basketball. My wife hates it when May and June come around because that means we're watching NBA playoff basketball nonstop. My favorite player is LeBron James. And I just look at people who I admire who are really, really excellent in their field, who have decided to do something beyond their field. You know, like LeBron James has LeBron James Foundation, and I think he invested something like $40 million in helping to create this school where every kid gets a bicycle and free tuition, and their tuition to college is paid for if they graduate from high school. There are a lot of other people who are doing a lot of things, and I find that to be truly, truly inspirational, because at some point after you've accomplished your own personal mission in some ways, it doesn't mean you don't want to continue doing that. Like when I was a kid, it was a dream for me to play in a great orchestra, or to play solo recitals, or make a solo CD, or teach at a college, right? For the large part, I've done a large percentage of those things. And when I was young, I think those aspirations were somewhat selfish. It's like, I want to do that because I like music, and I think Turandot and Mahler symphonies are really great pieces, and I want to do that. And I want to make a solo CD because my favorite trombone player has a solo CD, so that would be cool. Eventually, hopefully, you get past that, and then you start thinking, okay, now that I've done some of those things, what can I do for other people? And I find that to be super inspirational, and also find it to be a very interesting and different challenge. That's why when you mention I've gone out and done some talks or done presentations or written articles, that's one of the reasons why I do that, because I want something about my existence on this earth to go beyond what I did for myself.
Now, I know you also love to read. What kind of books would you recommend people to read for both musical and non-musical?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many great books for brass players they should read. Everyone should read Song and Wind by Arnold Jacobs, and The Art of Trombone Playing, The Art of Brass Playing by Philip Farkas, I think is a fantastic book. So there's that whole genre of things. Then there's also the books that I think are very closely related to becoming an improved musician or improving your musicianship that don't speak directly to music. For example, Practice Perfect by Doug Limov is a great book. Peak by Anders Ericsson. Talent is Overrated. All these different books, the books that go in that kind of direction, like how the science of improving. How do you go about doing that? I find those books to be very interesting. Books about physical training, I found to be quite interesting. There's a book called Marathon by Hal Higdon. There's another book that I really like, The Cyclist Training Bible by Joe Friel, because anyone who plays a brass instrument, or probably any instrument for that matter, but I think particularly brass, will agree that what we do is of course a musical endeavor, but it's also in some ways a physical and athletic endeavor. The same way that a great cyclist might train for the Tour de France, there are probably some parallels there between trying to work your way through a long opera season while you're also teaching lots of lessons and playing lots of recitals. I found a lot of common ground there.
Okay, so before we end today, what advice would you like to give our viewers right before we close?
One thing that's important is that you really love what you do. I think that's an important concept. It seems obvious. But if you want to be a musician and you don't enjoy practicing, for example, someone has to remind you to practice, or your teacher's always giving you a hard time because you're not practicing enough, you're probably just in the wrong business. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think people should do what they're most inspired to do, because that's where you will make the most significant change. That's where you'll do your best work. One of the reasons why I think I'm able to carry such an intense schedule is because basically all the things that I'm doing, I like doing. In one respect, they can be exhausting. Today was a long day. I drove up from New York City. It took me a little over 2 hours to get here. Then we walked in and we did a class from 10 to 12:40. And then we started a little early for the second class and went from 1:20 to 4, and now we're here doing an interview. But I've enjoyed every minute of it. I will be tired later. When I go home, I will crash and I will be absolutely exhausted. But talking about music and sharing ideas and hearing what other people think and hearing people play and watching them engage in trying to be better, I find that to be very, very energizing. I'll get up tomorrow after I've gotten some rest, and I'll feel the same way. And then when I go to work on Monday and it's time to do La Mer and Daphnis and Chloe or whatever other operas we're doing next week, I find that to be fascinating and exciting. When you view the world through that lens, is it work? It is, but it's not. It takes effort and it takes commitment, but it's not drudgery. There's a degree of joy that's associated with that work. That's advice I would give to students, is find something that makes you feel that way, where when you do it, whatever that is, whether that's writing or acting or singing or playing an instrument or going into law or doing something with medicine or working with animals, that activity or engaging in that process energizes you and provides you with some sense of excitement. It turns the light on for you, because that's probably the most important thing. That's how you'll know that you can do something for a long, long, long time and still feel very good about the work you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your extraordinarily busy schedule to be with us today and share your experiences with our viewers. So thank you very much, and good luck with all your things this year.
Thanks, Matt.